Good morning, my dear audience, wherever you are in the world. I want to welcome you to this important webinar being hosted by One Ocean Hub. My name is Eden Charles. I'm a lecturer at the Faculty of Law, University of the West Indies in Trinidad and Tobago. I used to be an ambassador of my country to the United Nations, and I have been a friend of the ocean and an advocate of the ocean and an ocean lawyer. Among the several positions I held in the past included the first chairman of the UN Preparatory Commission on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity beyond areas of national jurisdiction. So the ocean is important to us. But what is the import? What is the basis for our webinar today? We at the One Ocean Hub, and I'm proud to be the chairman of the advisory board of One Ocean Hub, we continue to submit that more attention needs to be given to the human cultural dimension of the ocean and its use. Recognizing the role of ocean cultures and heritage in contributing to sustainable ocean governance, we expect that this event will discuss, will bring out, will elaborate key messages in the forthcoming book entitled The Palgrave Handbook of Blue Heritage. Blue Heritage. I want you to keep blue in mind as we speak about the blue economy for sustainable development and so on. The book highlights that while nature is inherently valuable, humans hold diverse intrinsic cultural connections with the ocean and coast. The book represents a novel interdisciplinary collaboration between One Ocean Hub and global researchers, and you'd see the diverse nature of our panel this morning is global in nature, involving more than 25 authors worldwide, including scholars from Australia, United States, Seychelles, and India. It is edited by Professor Rosabelle Boswell of Nelson Mandela University, South Africa, and we expect Rose to be here. Also, Dr. David O'Kane of the Max Planck Institute in Germany. He is one of the editors as well. And Professor Jeremy Hills, University of Southern Pacific, or the South Pacific, sorry, in Fiji. As part of our event today, the panelists will discuss the role of arts and innovative methodology, such as improtheater, it's a new word for me, to create praxis in ocean management, and the role of singing in fisher folk, personhood, and power in Ghana. That should be exciting. Mpume Ntumbini, an award-winning performer, storyteller, and theater maker from Umlazi, Durban, South Africa, and the co-founder of Empire Theatre, contributes to the second part of our event. She will read Between Worlds. Then Professor Boswell's third poetry anthology, which articulates the nuances of human relations with the sea and the emerging responses of both animate and inanimate marine worlds. But I must put all of this in context. We have been speaking more intensively in recent time about the need for effective ocean governance. It is not surprising that this event is being held on the cusp of the convening later this morning of the United Nations Oceans Conference. We have seen attempts to implement fully the obligations, legally binding obligations, which flow from the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea and its related instruments. I mentioned the negotiations earlier on for a new instrument, a new agreement, internationally legally binding instrument under the Convention on Marine Biological Diversity beyond the areas of national jurisdiction. So whether within national jurisdiction or beyond national jurisdiction, ocean governance is important. And this is the means, this is the context in which we are hosting this seminar, because we have the view, that is One Ocean Hub, that ocean art and culture and ocean science play an important part and will continue to play an important part in ensuring that there's effective ocean governance, because it involves drilling down in terms of the ordinary folk, not just the academics who wear jacket and ties and that sort of thing. Yeah. So we have a very able panel this morning. Our program of work involves presentations, followed by discussion with expert discussons, then questions and answers and so on. And for your Q&As, we would ask that you use the feature, the Q&A feature on your device. And I want to begin almost immediately to introduce Professor Rose Boswell of Nelson Mandela University, South Africa, and she'll be speaking or presenting on why the Palgrave Handbook of Blue Heritage is important. Professor Boswell, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Charles, and to all the colleagues who are here this afternoon or morning, wherever you are it is in the world. Yes, so my internet connection is a little bit unstable, so I will try my best to proceed as swiftly as I can. Thank you, Senia, for putting on the slide. So this particular book entitled The Palgrave Handbook of Blue Heritage is a collaborative task between at least 20 odd scholars from across the world, investigating both the tangible and intangible cultural heritage of the world and the ways in which humans are connecting with the oceans and have been doing so for hundreds of years in different contexts, and to indicate that our human interest in the ocean is not something that is new, but is in fact that it is enduring. It has been in existence for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years. The first chapters by Professor Curtis Marion from Arizona State University indicates that in fact humans could be called the aquatic hunter-gatherers, basically because the early evolution of humankind began at along the southern African coast and along the East African coast. And we know from the out of Africa theory that human populations, modern humans, then migrated out of the African continent to other parts of the world. But it's not just the evolutionary history that is important to this book. Senia, could you just take us to the next slide, please? Thank you. The book is also unique in its consideration of social and cultural contributions to the pernicious and difficult, but also very important issue of sustainable oceans management. And what we aim to do in the book, and why I think it's also a very important contribution to the literature and to the discussion of ocean management, is the fact that it deconstructs the hegemonic value in order to prioritize oceans management strategy. So in short, and to perhaps provide a conclusion so that we can move on, the chapters are from scholars that are emerging in their field, who are human rights lawyers in the international space, such as Professor Elisa Morgera, who is the CEO of the UKRI One Ocean Hub project. There are also contributions from South African colleagues, emerging and established colleagues based here in South Africa, investigating issues around human storytelling and the role that that has played in shaping human relations with the sea. And of course, the fact that, our oceans are now being instrumentalized, are being used for economic gain by perhaps national governments that are not looking at the long-term consequences of such endeavors. These are some of the things that our authors are also looking at. Concluding slide, please, Senia. And so I would like to thank the various authors and particularly the editors, Dr. David O'Kane, who is here with me, who has been, a strong supporter and also a colleague and partner in this book, to edit this book of some 700 pages on the blue heritage of the world. I'd also like to thank Professor Elisa Mogera, Bola Erinosho, Jackie Sunde, Jeremy Hills, Gina Yaoduro, John Ansa, and David Wilson. From South Africa, Dylan, Kira Irwin, and Taryn Pereira, and of course our international colleagues, Pedro Pombo and Lynn Harris, Godfrey Baldacchino and Curtis Marion, as well as Varsha Patel and Pendra Choppy. And our emerging researchers who are part of our team, Jessica Thornton, Rai Pillay, Anezia Ase, and Mariam Dahan. And of course, a person who has played a very important role in my personal past in the study of the ocean and of African connections to the sea, Professor George Abungu. So I'd like to thank all of them, and of course for Palgrave for giving us this opportunity to participate in this very important endeavor. So on that note, I will mute my mic and allow the program to proceed. Thank you very much, Mr. Charles.
Thank you very much, Professor Boswell, and for your efficient use of time. I think you highlighted some important takeaways of the book, the importance of strategic ocean management and the importance of and the need for us to identify the long-term consequences of the exploitation of the resources of the oceans and seas, recognizing, sorry, let me put on my microphone, my camera, recognizing that we must engage in what we talk about inter and intra-generational equity regarding ocean usage. So I believe what you said encapsulated all of that. I now turn to Dr. Kira Irwin of Durban University of Technology, also South Africa. And Dr. Irwin will be speaking on the Palgrave Handbook as well. And in particular, Dr. Owens will be examining the role of narrative and theater in storytelling and so on as part of, I would say, ocean governance. So you have the floor, Dr. Owen.
Thank you so much, Chair. I appreciate that, and lovely to be with everyone today. I'm going to just start my timer, else I will not stop speaking. Let me just share my screen quickly. Just a big thank you to Rose and David for getting us to write this chapter. You can get so involved in your projects and don't often take the time to step back and think about them. And this chapter really let us do that. And so we're very appreciative. So, I mean, Rose has already spoken about this, and I'm sure many others will too. As in countries around the world, South Africa is embarking somewhat on this idea that the oceans are a new type of frontier for growth. And so we too have plans increasingly called the blue economy or marine spatial planning to some extent, which is attempting to govern these different desires to enter into the ocean, whether those are extractive, such as fishing or mining, or around desires to try and protect the ocean, such as marine protected areas. But really what we're interested in is, and cautious of, is how those particular decision-making spaces are dominated often by discourses of economics and science. And of course, the question then is, what other ways of knowing are not sitting at those decision-making tables, or even when they are invited in, are not necessarily taken seriously into consideration when we think about how humans might continue to interact with the oceans, especially in this age of climate change. So I'm going to start with a very local story, really, that I think shows some of these challenges and also exciting opportunities for what it might mean to take culture, heritage, and spiritual connection to the ocean into decision-making spaces. And this was around an application for oil and gas, just outside the city where I'm based in Durban. And it starts with a meeting with the Petroleum Association of South Africa. And at that meeting, what became apparent was that often government bodies and indeed the lawyers who are sitting within them homogenize what they call a community voice. And by doing that, it makes it very easy for them to try and advocate between a decision, a big international company who's promising growth and jobs versus a community who doesn't want this type of mining just on their coastline. But we felt what was really lost there actually is the myriad of different concerns that people along the coast were trying to express at these meetings. And this gave birth to a research project where we aim to listen to the voices of different people along the KwaZulu-Natal coast line. And so we spoke to fishers, to activists, to marine scientists, marine educators, to religious practitioners who often use the ocean as part of their spiritual practice and ritual. We looked into archives, we spoke to ex-government officials, to traditional historians, to really ask ourselves, you know, what do people feel with and for the oceans? And how do they imagine their future and the relationship of the ocean to humanity in that future? Those narratives were turned into a piece of what we call research-based theatre, where the stories become composites. So the narratives are very real, they come from research, and they create composite characters. And this was a production called Lalela Uwandle, which in isiZulu, the main language that is spoken from where I come from, means listen to the sea or listen to the ocean. And it tells intergenerational stories of how different people have made a life near the sea and how important it is both to livelihoods, but also to spiritual meaning, as well as to cultural understandings around medicine and ancestors. The story too has a character who is a marine scientist, because this is an important part of knowledge, as we know, when it comes to ocean governance. Now, the idea with this particular type of research is that it creates an alternative listening and discussion catalyst for people. And so we took it along the coastline. So not only is it important to listen to a chorus of voices, but it's very important to try and think about creating an audience with ears that really tries to hear these stories and grapple with the complexity of what it means to listen to these different ways of knowing the sea together, rather than the more traditional way in which there's a very clear knowledge hierarchy in which science normally sits right at the top and tradition or spiritual beliefs, if they're lucky to be included, are somewhat at the bottom. This approach takes and draws on the African tradition of call and response. And so the play is performed for the audience, but the play is not the end of the conversation. Rather, it is the opening question to say, now that you hear these stories, stories of subsistence fishers, stories of marine scientists, stories of marine educators, stories of sangomas, stories of traditional healers, and of Zionists who also have a mixture of ancestral and Christian belief that's very much linked to ocean and water practices. What does it mean? What does it mean to you? How does it make you feel? How does it make you imagine we might start to govern our oceans in this particular part of the world? And so really the play is the opening for a larger conversation with the audience. And oftentimes in the audience, there are people sitting in quite different positions to ocean governance and to making sense of things like marine spatial planning. So it can provide an opportunity for conversations that don't often happen. So what do people say? And I'm going to go through this rather fast because unfortunately I'm almost out of time already. But I think it's important to see the words of some of our audience members, because when you do tell stories of the many different ways that humans connect with the ocean, it allows the recognition for belief systems and for heritage, even if they're not your own, just to recognize the importance and the fundamental need for humanity to feel connected to powerful natural places, such as our oceans. So you'll see some of the quotes, and at the bottom one I just will read, where it says, "I felt moved," because oftentimes when speaking of the oceans, There only seems to be a concern for ocean life, but this play profoundly displays how much heritage and people's connections reside within the sea. Now, doing this sort of storytelling, one has to be very aware of politics as well. In South Africa, there's a long history of racism linked both to conservation and to economic development. And so part of telling these stories is also being very honest and frank around the kind of racism and oppression and forced removals from the coast that have happened in our part of the world. But equally, we had to be very careful that we didn't play into essentializing groups of people or expected stereotypes. And one of the things that this play tried to do is to create translation protocols through showing just how complex stories are, in fact, both within an individual, but across groups too. So the possibilities in which science and spiritual and traditional beliefs might actually find moments of solidarity in their concern for the ocean and not always being pitted against themselves, as often happens in these government forums around blue economy. I'm out of time, so I won't go into too much detail, but for many of us, we felt that particularly one character, Nolwandle, just embodied this ability to have more plural ways of knowing. And just because we hold different ways of knowing, this does not mean that we cannot work across difference and work with very complex and sometimes contradicting ways of knowing. So let me end there because I've run a little bit out of time. But just to say that one thing that art, we feel, does do is enable a very different kind of conversation, one that is desperately needed in our country. And really this means that it's not just about an invitation to the table of decision-making spaces. It's about trying to think through what those formats look like, how the conversation takes place, recognizing power inequalities, and having an imagination that could spark something new. I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Owen. I think that not only did you use the time very sufficiently, but local experience. Listen to the sea. And to listen to the sea, you must listen to the local communities. If you want to improve ocean governance, if you want to carry out the obligations under UNCLOS, the Fish Stocks Agreement, or the 1994 Agreement, or the Paris Agreement and its impact on climate change, listen to the local communities. So I think that what you have done also is not only describe your chapter in this handbook, but you have pointed us to a number of important variables we must take into consideration in dealing with ocean governance. Do we only look at the economic aspect and the scientific aspect, and the question of marine protected areas? We need to listen to the sea, listen to the local folk who have the knowledge as to whether a particular zone should be a marine protected area. So I want to thank you very much for that. And I see that our audience is growing, diverse audience, different parts of the globe. But we must move on, and I want to bring on now Dr. John Ansah and Dr. Georgina Yao Oduru of the University of Cape Coast on their chapter in the handbook. And they would provide a detailed analysis on the narratives of non-compliance. On the non-fishing day, and that's a new thing for me as well. Non-compliance on the non-fishing day, which is Tuesday. I think this should be very interesting. So let me give way to both Dr. Oduru and Dr. Ansah to let's hear about non-compliance on the non-fishing day and the effects of non-compliance. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone from Ghana, from the University of Cape Coast specifically. So we are happy to share our chapter, which is in the book, the handbook of the Palgrave Handbook of Blue Heritage. And here, this chapter was written by three of us, led by Dr. John Ansah, myself, Georgina Oduru, and then Dr. David Wilson. but the two of us are presenting this afternoon. So I'll take a part and then John will continue. So we're very happy to share. This is part of the work we are doing for the One Ocean Hub Research Project, the ethnographic bits, and we are part of RP5. So our work looks at non-compliance in Tuesday non-fishing day, and then how this non-compliance came about through the effects of religion, specifically Christianity, and how that undermined traditional authority within the Ghanaian sociocultural space, and then its effects when it comes to. So we start by arguing that the ocean, as we saw from Kira's presentation, is an integral part of the Earth ecosystem. And it's imbibed with a whole lot of meanings in terms of the perceptions we hold about the ocean, in terms of the how we actually perceive and the connection we have with the ocean. So scholarly analysis of ocean demonstrate that there's close link in terms of culture, in terms of livelihood, and also it is imbibed with lots of rituals. And in Ghana, for example, the Akans, which is the largest ethnic group, hold certain perceptions about the ocean. They see the ocean as a creature with a creature which has implication for the image of the ocean in terms of the physical manifestation, the supernatural beings, and therefore there are some rules and regulations that govern the use of the ocean. There are even some of the animals from the ocean, where we sort of connect it with ritual meaning, such that when they die, we perform funerals for them as we would for human beings. And additionally, we have some taboos associated with the ocean based on the community within which the ocean is located. In Ghana, we have 4 regions, which are coastal regions: the Volta region, the Central region, the Western region, and the Greater Accra region. So depending on which region, there are some days that are set aside as taboo days when fishing is not done. And one such day is Tuesday. We also have Sundays for some people, and then Thursdays for others, depending on the location. But in the Central region, where this study was conducted, Tuesdays are such days. They are non-fishing days that are set aside. And this custom is anchored in the belief that the sea is supernatural, and as such, it requires a time to rest. Whilst we have this belief, actually, if you look at it, it also has economic value for livelihood, but also for the society. Because if the sea rests, it means that fish is restored, which has value for the community. So, however, with the presence of religion, specifically traditional religion, which has a deep history, and also current social changes, chieftaincy and other people who see to the compliance of the observation of this day has been undermined. But when violations occur, and an example of such groups are the Asafo companies, who are military groups in the society traditionally. But when the observation is breached, people don't go scot-free, for which reason we have the greens here on the slides. Sometimes because you breach the rule or the taboo, you are fined. Other times you are suspended from going for fishing. And other times the harvest that you got from the sea is confiscated, meaning you can't actually use it. And you have to pacify the ocean, the sea, because of this abuse or bleach that you have gone through. Informed by this, our paper looked at disturbance and reality, as I said initially. Whilst the day is set aside, it also has economic value and then livelihood value for the communities. So we argue that there's some discovered reality here. Recent scholarly works have identified that customary laws restrict fishing on Tuesdays. This is adhered to in some societies, though there's social change. In other societies, it's been abused or it's been disregarded or violated. So that is the situation that we find ourselves in. Yet, and as we argue in our chapter, there are 2 key factors: the expansion of Christianity specifically, because most of the coastal communities adhere to traditional religion or Christianity rather than Islam. And also, this social change has undermined the chieftaincy institution, which ensures the adherence of this observation. So in our presentation, we dwell on 2 key approaches or methodologies. We look at a historical perspective, and then here through the historical discovery, we look at how Christian religion has undermined this authority. And we also use a case study of one of the communities in the central region, Abanze specifically, the first one, as a case study where the whole breach or the violation started. But we also talked to some people through interviews and focus group discussions, some communities, for their perspective on how this undermining of the authority is done. So at this point, I'm going to pause and I'm going to allow my colleague, Dr. John Ansah, to share with us some of the voices regarding how the non-compliance is being played out and its effect on the society. Thank you. John, take it up.
All right, thank you very much. So Senia, can you please move the slide a bit forward? Yeah, so this is the diagram which would help us appreciate the entire picture relative to the non-compliance. As my colleague has already indicated, in the literature, we identify some key arguments, and these key arguments are issues that border first of all on Christianity, and then the other one that borders on the reduction of the powers of the traditional leaders. But with the case study that we used and the information that we picked around, it became clear that there were some emerging context and emerging conditions that were also playing critical roles in understanding the reason for which people will not comply to the Tuesday non-fishing day. And here we located some political legal stresses, and these political legal stresses are things that happened or that have some historical antecedent. It's some about 20 years ago, there was a particular chief who some people felt was undermining the authorities of some other traditional leaders, and these traditional leaders felt that this particular chief didn't even have the right to rule. Indeed, his authority could not be recognized. So they decided to present the case to a modern judicial system, that is the court. And in the court, they needed to raise some money to pay for the legal charges, pay the state and then the lawyer. Now, what happened was that because they needed money to help them get the case heard in court, they decided to use the Tuesday non-fishing day as a day where they would fish. Now, the idea was that if they fish on Tuesday, whichever proceeds they make, they would use those, they would bring those proceeds to the other traditional leaders who were in dispute with the chief, so that they would be able to raise that money. Now, as they did that, they discovered something. As my colleague initially said, when this Tuesday non-fishing day is observed or is not complied with, there are sanctions. But then there are some beliefs associated with them that, yes, on those days when the sea is supposed to revive itself, when you breach them, you will be punished by the gods and all those things. Now, they use that particular Tuesday to fish, but they realized there was no, spiritual effect. Now, that was an important experience that they had. Now, this experience made them to now redefine the custom. Because the idea is that, yes, the gods are supposed to punish us when we go for fishing on Tuesdays. Now we go for fishing on Tuesdays for certain political economic purposes. These things do not happen. The effects do not happen. So this redefinition of custom then made them to sustain whichever change that they had introduced in their economic realm relative to fishing. Because yes, they were not fishing on Tuesday. Now they decide to add Tuesday as one of their fishing days. Now they decided, even after they had gone to court, they even ended up winning the case. They had gone to court and the case was settled. One was expecting that they would revert to the compliance of the non-fishing day, but through the decisions of those very traditional leaders who succeeded in overthrowing the chief through the court decision, they decided to then sustain this Tuesday fishing activity by appealing to certain economic and then community development demands. So now they do not go for fishing on Tuesday to enable them raise money for any political legal process, but they decide to use whichever proceeds they were making from the Tuesday fishing to promote economic and then community community development activities. So whilst they maintained that particular day, which is a non-fishing day, all because of certain economic and community demands, they ended up, violating this particular thing. Now, when they started violating this, there were some other communities who looked on, and these communities, in actual fact, have constant interaction with wherever this thing started from. That is the Abanzi community. These communities include Nakwa, Ekumfi, and the rest. Now, the constant interaction that went on between the fishermen in the other communities and then Abanzi made them to discover that, after all, our friends go for fishing on Tuesdays. We do not go for fishing on Tuesdays. There are no spiritual effects. Then why don't we also start fishing on Tuesday? So this thing, you can see that small thin line, which suggests that after whatever had happened in Abanzi, there was this ripple effect on other communities. And these communities, by observing whatever had happened, even though there wasn't any political legal stressor, in the name of economic and community development demands, also started violating the Tuesday non-fishing day. And this thing is what we have seen along the coast. But of course, as my colleague indicated, it is not all the communities who are currently exhibiting. But the expectation is that if this thing keeps on happening, other communities will, as they also observe these violations taking place, they would equally start the violation. But then it is not just the mere violation. It's about the fact that this particular custom, this particular culture that we see here is constantly, being undermined by virtue of certain secular reasons. But these secular conditions that are actually happening are not, as it stands now, not being met with the right responses. And that is what in our paper we thought we needed to look at, because if there are changes that are happening with regard to the redefinition of customs, and these customs are being redefined by virtue of certain secular demands, then what do we do to ensure that the original purpose for which that particular custom was established would be achieved within the context of modernity? And that is why we are looking. So Senia, please, can you move on to the next slide? And that is why we are looking at the situation whereby we are saying that there are two sides to this whole phenomenon. One, there is a trace of hopelessness, in the sense that this particular custom is gradually getting eroded. It is catching on with so many other communities along the coast, and that is a sense of hope. But then there is also a sense of hope, in the sense that some of them, even though they have observed some other communities they've observed these communities do that, they have decided to hold on to it. But how do we ensure that these communities that have decided to hold on to this Tuesday non-fishing day will not get disincentivized as they look on and see their other communities violating them? And that is where we see that, yes, indeed, some effort would have to be made. So the question is, what way forward do we have? So can you please move on to the next slide? So what then is supposed to be the way forward? Now we are talking about the fact that these customs would have to be reconstructed. Now, how do we ensure that people observe these customs within the context of secularism, with the intention of ensuring that there is a proper sustenance of the purpose for which this Tuesday non-compliance was observed? As you said, it is supposed to ensure sustenance of the ocean. So if there is reconstruction, one, it would have to involve the fisher folk. These fisher folk would have to come to a point where they get to understand why these customs were there. And it is not just a matter of they getting to understand, but it's a matter of reorganizing themselves to approach this particular non-Tuesday fishing day as a day, not as a day that has to be observed, not because one would attract sanctions from the supernatural, but as a day that would have to be observed with the intention of promoting environmental sustainability. So this is where we expect that there will be a convergence of the local knowledge, a reconstruction of this local knowledge, and existing science relative to the need to conserve nature through, the setting aside of certain days. And for this reason, we expect that when these things are done, there will be proper outcomes with regard to a sustainable fisheries management across all the fishing communities in Ghana. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctors Uduru and Ansa. I think it was a tremendous learning experience for me, and I'm sure the members of the audience, wherever they are. We take it for granted that treaties and so on have provided the answers, but for those of us who are involved in international law, we know that treaties also codify customary practices. And we have seen that here. I would submit that if most countries engage with hope and not hopelessness and adopt and comply to this Ghanaian tradition of non-fishing Tuesdays, issues relating to overfishing and the protection of the marine environment would reduce considerably, and countries would be implementing the obligations. In some cases, we are seeing a deficit in implementation. So these practices in Ghana, I hope that there is no hopelessness, and there's hope that it will continue. And the issue of sanctions are also important. And I think this is something that we can learn as we seek to address illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing and overfishing and other destructive fishing practices, and the protection of the marine environment in Ghana, the African continent, and other parts of the world. So I want to commend you on such a very novel presentation, I must say, using culture and the supernatural to reinforce legal obligations. Thank you very much. I now go again, I stay with Ghana, and I bring on Dr. Eric Uchere from the University of Cape Coast, also in Ghana, on the use of songs and singing and issues relating to fisher folk identity, power, inequality, and gender connectedness to the sea in Ghana. How songs and singing address these particular issues. Dr. Eric Uchere, you may begin, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So still following up on some of the things that my colleagues have said from Ghana. My name is Eric Uchere, and I'm a member of the One Ocean Hub Ghana team. I'm a co-IA in it, and I'm happy to share part of my work. Over the past year, I've been trying to work and produce a documentary on the musical tradition of the indigenous Ghanaian artisanal fisher folk who populate the southern border of Ghana, the northeasternmost part of the tropical Atlantic Ocean, the part often referred to as the Gulf of Guinea. What have I been doing? I'm interested in how the people have used sound or music specifically, how they have constituted sonic background, so how they have created a space with the music and navigate within that sound space in order to achieve the most. So I've really been tossing these words, space and pacing within that space, and in order to achieve the most. Why focus on fishing songs? One of the big questions that was the driving force for this documentary and other things that I'm doing is that these particular fishing songs, in fact, they have a very long history, and it predates a lot of the popular cultural musical forms, art forms that exist in today's Ghana, and they have the potential to explain a whole lot of them. And so it is really worth focusing on, and they have been largely under-researched for reasons that I came to know when I started researching or working with the fisher folk and studying their music. Now, if we look at the stylistic features of the music, it has enormous potential for so many disciplinary aspects, cultural evolution, evolutionary studies in sound production, and so on. Variations, creativity, imagination, and all the like, and which makes it really, really important to focus on. But if we also analyze the themes in the songs, it has great connections to current debates in all spheres that you can imagine, in terms of politics, religion, discussions about the blue economy, and a whole lot. So in this documentary, I try to shed light on how this music reflects all these, the enormous plurality in society. And most importantly, because this particular tradition, for reasons that may be attributed to, let's say, economic factors, modernization and technology, globalization, actually face the threat of extinction. And so it was really important and timely that something like this be done. I'll just play a little excerpt for those of you who have not seen this, to have a little idea of how the music is being deployed in the context of work, and then I'll come back to talk about it. Okay. So the excerpts we just saw are examples with lexical words, and I will explain that very shortly. But I play you another excerpt where they don't use a lot of lexical words, meaning that these are words which do not have meanings in themselves. So if you are looking to understand the song that way by listening to lyrics, which is a very common way of analyzing music, then that fails you. So just listen to these examples and then I come back. All right, so you have an idea of the kinds of song or how the music accompanies the work that they do. So I wanted to give a little background, but I'm happy my colleagues already spoke about it in terms of the regional spread of the fisher folk, 4 major regions, and within each of these regions are dominant ethnic groups. So from the east to west respectively, if you look at the map of Ghana, we have the Ewe who populate the Volta region of Ghana, who are the ethnic dominant in the Volta region. We have the Ga, who are the dominant ethnic group within Greater Accra. We have the Fanti in the central region and the Nzima. And it is important to know that the music reflects the dominant cultural forms of these major ethnic groups. But of course, there is migration and there are issues of travel and work. And so over the years of working together along the shores, you find members of one ethnic group in another region and in that order. And that has implications on not just the style of the song, but the content also, which I will speak about shortly. So artisanal fishing is one of the oldest occupational trades for those who occupy the southern border of Ghana. And for a very long time, the kind of artisanal fishing that they practiced and the one that the music accompanies most of the time is the one called the seine net fishing, because they go a few hundred meters into the ocean, they cast the net in a loop, and they come back ashore. And with the help of these very strong ropes, which are attached to the seine nets, they drag for hours until the catch comes ashore. And they often do this to music. Examples of the music is what I showed you and in the earlier slide. So in order to have a comprehensive analysis for the documentary of the music that we've recorded, we basically use an approach called polyvocal ethnography, where we actually go into the field, we record the music in the context of the work, but because of the noise and the sound at the ocean, we also select a number of them and bring them to a recording studio, and they do medleys of their songs, which is devoid of all the sound and all the noise at the ocean. And then we engage them in discussions around the music. So it is not that we, the scholars who are trying to make sense of their music for them, but together with the practitioners, we try to co-construct the meaning from this music, this practice that they do. So we look at the music in terms of what it says, in terms of its symbolic and referential meaning. We look at the music in terms of what it does, its pragmatic and functional meaning, and we look at the music in terms of its aesthetic and non-referential meaning. So I'll just summarize a little bit of the findings, that the music doesn't only serve as accompaniment for work, which is what seems to stand out when we look at the music in the context of the work, but there is much, 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 much more. And so within the sphere of this music, we see markers of great identity in terms at the level of having a shared code as people who are practicing the same occupation. And over the years, they have actually developed their own sub-language, which for me is very, very interesting, and which is decipherable when you listen to the music. So that when they sing the songs, and even if you understand the language, the dominant language, let's say Ewe or Ga or Fanti, if you are not part of the fishing folk, there's a tendency that you may not really understand or what they are talking about. And there is a reason for this, that the music has become some kind of tool for resistance that they have developed over the years, because the seas and the oceans the shores are public spaces. They are able to communicate and direct, the recipients of the messages in the song by using the fisher's tongue. And so we see markers of identity, both ethnic and linguistic identities. We are able to track sort of people who have migrated from one place to another by analyzing the music that is being performed at one place and how it has also changed and so on. Through music, one of the things that we see is how, hello.
Eric, sorry to disturb you, and very important presentation. Is it important that you begin to wrap up as quickly as possible? One of the panelists wants to come back, one has to leave very soon. Thank you.
All right. So through the music, we see an awareness of such issues as climate change and modernity and pollution of the ocean, and how that actually inhibits attempts to revitalize the ocean. So I guess the point I was trying to make with all the what you see on the slide is to show that the music doesn't just act as accompaniment to their work, but it helps to reveal a whole lot about them. And I'll just end by playing a 1 minute just summary of the introductory part of the documentary. Thank you.
They often look poor and uninformed. but they are rich in cultural traditions and knowledgeable in the ways of life. They may appear frail and weary, but they are as agile as a monkey and fit as a rock. They may not have high levels of formal education, but they bear markers of high sophistication, at least linguistically. They may look old and stern, but they are young at heart and playful to the marrow. We peek into the multiple realities of the diurnal lived experiences of Ghanaian artisanal fisherfolk as it filters through the music that accompanied their work.
Thank you very much.
And thank you very much for that very important presentation, using songs to help promote understanding of SDG 14, using the resources of seas and oceans for sustainable development. I want to thank you for that, Eric. But I want to bring back on very quickly Professor Rose Boswell to speak about Between Words, a poetry book. Professor Boswell, we know your time is short, but you have the floor.
Thank you very much. So this book, if I can speed to the first page, it's a poetry anthology that in essence encapsulates the in-betweenness, the liminality of human beings.
Hello, Professor Boswell seems to be having some connectivity issue, Wi-Fi issue. If you're hearing me, Professor, perhaps you could take off your your camera. I'm not hearing you. I don't know if anybody else is having the same problem.
Apologies. So there was a split in the transmission. So as I was saying, because of the climate crisis and the declining ocean health, humans are increasingly experiencing a liminality, a feeling of liminality between this world and what I
Hello? I think Professor Boswell probably has a problem with bandwidth. So maybe taking off your camera might help save bandwidth. We could hear you.
Now, I'm sure. Basically indicates some of the images that I collected from the digital artist Arthur Haas, who is based in the Netherlands, and his work in a way envisages the strange future world which humans might actually have to inhabit should they not heed the IPCC calls to attend to the challenges of climate change, and should they not change state and their own personal behavioral tendencies with regard to the management of the natural environment, and specifically the oceanic environment. And these images present, I think, a phenomenal, but also a very frightening world, which we might have to potentially inhabit. And so the book, or the poetry anthology, is entitled Between Worlds, and is split literally between these two worlds, one in which there is continuing pollution of our oceans, whether through oil pollution and gas and oil and gas exploration on the one hand, and then this other potential imaginary world which we might actually have to inhabit. So I do encourage you to have a look online. The book is available on Amazon.com and other reputable online stores. And now I will leave the space to, I think, Mpumi to hopefully present some of this work. I wanted to show you the art piece, but I see the slide is not progressing. to the next page. Senya, would you be able to at least show that particular image? Yes, just go back. Yes, just to this one. Sorry, the previous one. Thank you. This is the image that I wanted to share with you because I call it, these are moments of severance, of humans basically being cut off from an environment in which they have been imbricated and embedded for hundreds of thousands of years. And now we are in this, what many social scientists call the Anthropocene. We are busy creating this moment of disjuncture and severance from the natural environment, which will not be in our own best interests in the years to come, which are not very far away. So I'm going to now leave it to Mpumi, and please forgive me if I leave soon, because I have a pickup at this particular point. Thank you for the opportunity of speaking. And before I go, I just wanted to say, I didn't say it before, but I'm based at Nelson Mandela University. I'm an NRF, or National Research Foundation Chair in Ocean Cultures and Heritage. And I'm also an anthropologist, and my work has been based in Southern and East Africa, as well as the Southwest Indian Ocean world, on the issue of intangible and coastal cultural heritage. So thank you for the opportunity, and thanks to all the collaborators.
Thank you very much, Professor Boswell, for your very invaluable contribution, having to speak on 2 occasions despite your busy schedule. I think we're supposed to have a bit of poetry reading by Mpumi Ntombini, award-winning performer and storyteller, theater maker from Umlazi, Durban, and the co-founder of Empa Theatre. Mpumi, I think we'll see a video with the poetry presentation.
Plastic. Arriving below, I find you bare, your sandy body unadorned of coral jewels. I find no pearl necklaces or tight clam safes. Instead, I find plastic chandeliers, unchanging for 1,000 years. The tide came. The tide rose that day, an unexpected swell, a wall of rock that blocked off all light. No one expected it, but its time had come. Like clockwork, the earth was done, and men undone.
Thank you very much in your absence, that video on plastics, the effect of plastics, which helps us to emphasize the importance of the recently adopted convention to combat plastic pollution. We've had a very robust set of presentation this morning, very clear, identifying areas of ocean governance with a mixture of customs, issue of gender, the issue of overfishing, the issue of sanctions and compliance, a whole amalgamation of important issues coming out of art as a means of promoting the blue economy, blue heritage event, and so on. And these are not found in any body of treaty law. However, listening to the presentation, we are now able to see how we could benefit in terms of, we meaning states, in terms of treaty implementation, could benefit from some of these cultural practices. But there are people who are, 2 officials who are experts in the area as well, and they will discuss some of the takeaways, the outcomes of the presentations. I first invite Dr. Chelsea Koch, I hope I pronounced your name correctly, from the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO. Dr. Koch, you have the floor, please.
Great, thank you. And thank you to all the wonderful panelists today. These were really inspiring, informative, and excellent examples of the connection between humans, knowledge, culture, and the ocean, and that which draws us to the ocean and cannot be overlooked when we're talking about developing solutions for society. So I'm here on behalf of the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, or the Ocean Decade. And I'm really here to just echo and amplify the messages that came across here today, that the intersection of art and cultural heritage, traditional knowledge, and ocean science are so important to achieving the vision of the Ocean Decade, which is achieving a healthy and sustainable ocean for all. And within the framework of the Ocean Decade, we've defined the ocean we want has been defined and summarized by 7 societal outcomes, one of which is an inspiring and engaging ocean where society understands and values the ocean in relation to human well-being and sustainable development. And further to that, one of the 10 decade challenges for which action under the decade are focused is dedicated to changing humanity's relationship with the ocean and how we understand and connect with the ocean. And during the first year of the decade, one of our flagship Ocean Decade programs is the Cultural Heritage Framework Program. And this is supporting cultural heritage initiatives like those that we've talked about today across all of the endorsed programs and the ones that will come throughout the course of the decade. And just acknowledging too that we've also prioritized marine World Heritage sites as priority areas during the decade. And I just need to add that the Ocean Decade aims to deliver transformative ocean science that's focused on solutions and provides the knowledge that we need to inform global, regional, and national policy frameworks, and also emphasizing that it's co-designed and co-delivered with diverse stakeholders and diverse sectors of society. And an important element of this is the recognition of indigenous and local knowledge or traditional knowledge as a key knowledge source as part of this, and supporting mechanisms where this knowledge can inform policies and decision-making that impacts these local communities. So this is all to say that these avenues will help transform ocean science and conservation, raise awareness of the importance of the ocean, and inspire support for action. So we certainly encourage more participation at the intersection of art, cultural heritage, and ocean science to deliver these transformative solutions to achieve a healthy ocean. And yes, we look forward to seeing more initiatives like this within the Ocean Decade. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Koch, and for not only emphasizing the importance of what we heard from the presentations, but to enlighten us a bit on the UN Ocean Decade and the important work that is being done by the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO. And I'm sure the participants at some juncture may want to hear a bit more about this. So if there's additional information, you could put it in the chat. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to Symphorine Nihala Maniri Soa, Blue Ventures, who may be assisted by Paul Anton. They're from the Southwest Madagascar Field Programs. And you want to hear what Symphorine has to say in terms of being an expert discussant. Thank you.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, I'll just jump in and present a little bit who Symphorine is. So Symphorine and I work for an international marine conservation organization called Blue Ventures. We support coastal communities to rebuild fisheries and restore ocean life. The two of us met when I first arrived in his village in Southwest Madagascar 9 years ago. And he was still a middle school student participating in an environmental club. Outside of school, he was relentless in his quest to learn how to use cameras and computers to make music videos for his friends who had written songs about the ocean. And as an organization inspired by his and his friends' passion and the success of their early projects, we created a community outreach team, which he now leads. He has become an incredibly talented media producer, using his skills to capture the voices and talents of those from his community and engage them in marine resource management. And I'll pass it over to him there to share a little bit more about what he does.
Thanks for having me here to talk Where I'm from, people has a story to tell. A story mostly about the ocean. It's what we think about when we first wake up, and what we dream about when we go to sleep. The name of our tribe is Vezu, which means to paddle. So our relationship with the ocean defines us. The story of our elders who were very important for our last generation to learn.
It seems that there's a Wi-Fi connection.
About the fishing, and also how to answer there were still fish to catch for their children and their grandchildren. But the tradition of passing stories from one generation to the next around the fire at night has stopped, and we are losing this story as our elders passed on. And today the youth have a new challenge to face, but they have a story of their own that they are eager to tell through the song and theater. Even in the most remote village, people have a device to add their watch and listen to something, but they really like to watch something that they can relate it to, something about the ocean. And the youth want the people to see and listen, to hear their talent. They are always coming to us, asking to record their song about sea turtle, seaweed farming, or to film a movie about a family using a bad fishing net, or danger of eating shark meat. So we try to capture this so that future generation can benefit from how they see the changing world. But now we, with some other youth in the village, we produce film, music video, and weekly radio show for our community. It's all about the relation, our community relationship with the ocean, to the ocean. We also work with local artists to make comic books, posters, and presentation. For example, the local bylaw or fisheries data, so that people refer to in village meeting. Learning in song and film become popular, saying in the community, and children draw the pictures that they see in the comics book and posters. These form of art are very useful tools to allow our community to express themselves, but also to engage with each other around marine resource management and conservation.
Okay, thank you very much, Symphorian and Anton and Paul for enlightening us on what's happening in Madagascar. I think coming out of what Symphorian mentioned, the issue of future generations, which means that you're very aware in Madagascar through your work of the importance of good ocean governance for the benefit of future generations, inter and intra-generational equity. So we wish you all success in continuing to use music and dance. We saw the traditions being played out here in Madagascar, as we also saw them being used in Ghana. But my dear audience, we have had a wealth of information, a tremendous amount of knowledge here on culture and the art and so on in promoting ocean governance and assisting with the realization of SDG 14 in terms of the implementation of commitments in different instruments through art and culture and traditions. And we have an expert group as well of officials, individuals who would be assisting in answering any questions or answers or comments you may wish to make in the chat feature. And these are Dr. Bolanle Iwinosho of the University of Cape Coast from Ghana again, Dr. David Wilson, University of Strathclyde, and Miss Antia Christophels de Plus from Nelson Mandela University in South Africa. So do we have any questions there, Senya? Any questions or comments which may not be in the chat, but which you may want to pose now?
I think most of the there's no question in the chat, but there is questions. There's no question in the Q&A function, but there is question from Alpha. Are women involved in the role during the songs?
Yes. So any one of our the panelists who did not present, but two expert question answers, to put it that way, may begin. I think Bolanle wants to begin. Thank you very much.
Yes, I think Dr. Tre has actually tried to answer that question, but just to give a little bit more background around that question. Now, fishing in Ghana itself is, we describe it as a very gendered profession. And what do we mean by that? So the actual harvest of the fish is primarily usually only done by the men, but the women occupy what we call the pre-harvest part, as well as the post-harvest part of the value chain. And so everything from, selling the fish to marketing it to cleaning and processing and smoking and all of that is what the women do. And so because of that very strict division of roles within fishing, of course, that explains why in Eric's video, much of those you saw in the video are men, because that was particular around the harvest. So if you perhaps wanted to see a bit more women, the processing of it will include lots more women in it. And of course, that also has consequences for, gender equality, etc., as well as even the way the governance structure is, the governance of fisheries in Ghana is managed. But I will leave it at that, so I don't go on too much.
I have a question for you, Bolanle, before you go. In terms of the traditional sanctions, and in terms of the need for compliance, how much of that has found itself in Ghanaian law?
Right, thank you for that. Now, theoretically, that all of those traditional sanctions compliance, we perhaps will categorize that as customary law. Now, as with many countries that have experienced colonialism and, where perhaps former British colonies, we have essentially what we call a plural legal system, where theoretically the customary laws are part of our laws, as well as what we call the national or state-led laws. And so I use the word theoretically often because what you see in practice is that priority or emphasis is on the national or state-led laws to the detriment of customary laws. Now, if you go to the communities, as Gina and John's presentation mentioned, they still observe these rules and they can still mete out sanctions, but that is gradually being diluted by national law, which focuses on a very centralized management system led by government departments, fisheries commission, etc. And so that's the big challenge, and that's one of the things I should say the hub is trying to do, see how we can essentially see what research around how customary laws can perhaps be properly perhaps the word is reintegrated, properly take a position within fisheries law and wider ocean management in Ghana. And of course, there are obstacles to that. And interestingly, in our chapter in the book, the Palgrave book, we explore some of those challenges and obstacles to putting customary law at center place in national fisheries law. But I guess the conclusion is, if you can use some of the art-based methodologies, we particularly look to storytelling as a useful tool that we potentially can have a situation in which these customary laws are properly protected and as respected, not just by the communities, but of course by national institutions and government departments as well.
Thank you very much. And I want to bring David or Antia here. David is a historian. We have heard from the presentations from the Ghanaians and the South Africans about the use of traditional practices and cultural practices in assisting with ocean governance. Could you point to any other place that you have found that, David? Maybe the UK or elsewhere, David?
Excellent, thank you for the question, and thank you for all the wonderful presentations as well. Yeah, I think it's really important to recognise that that role of traditional knowledge plays out globally, as you suggest there. Bola mentioned that the impact of colonisation, and I think that's one of the big issues that came across in a lot of the presentations, is that role of colonisation in disrupting traditional knowledge and its place within negotiations and international and national law, for example. So where that kind of scientific focus receives the most focus rather than traditional knowledge. And that's something that, I mean, to take my own historical research into consideration, it begins in the 1850s in Britain, whereby British officials are their voices are undermined by scientists in Britain and by the perspectives of British scientists at the sort of emergence of fisheries science there. And then that's exported globally through the British Empire, through colonisation as well, whereby the voices of fishers throughout the world are just undermined or not taken into consideration in consultation practices or for policy. And as I say, I mean, that's a process that begins in the 1850s and 1860s, and really in colonial spaces starts to occur in the 1920s and 1930s. So it's not, a long process. It's only been in the past 100 years that traditional knowledge in many ways has been framed as traditional knowledge, as something distinctive from science and distinctive from scientific knowledge, which is a bit of an issue as well. So yeah, I think it's something that's been much actually a place of recent history rather than long history, and something that we are hopefully starting to move away from as well, to start to recognise and start to amplify traditional knowledge and fishers' perspectives as well. So does that answer your question?
Thank you very much, David. Yes, it does. There is a new treaty on plastic pollution to combat plastic pollution. And one of the questions coming out of the session today is, we want to go back to singing in Ghana, that practice. And the question is, how much plastic pollution has affected singing with the say nets filled with plastics? How was that, how has plastic pollution affected those who are fishing while they're singing, and their nets have been filled with this contaminant plastic? Anybody wants to answer that question? Eric, I think you.
Yes. Yes. I think I already typed an answer to that, but to talk briefly about it. In my fieldwork in recording, filming for the documentary, we have many instances of real where, you know, the fishermen have gone and cast their net and it's really, really only caught onto a lot of plastic. So it is really a pressing problem. The thing is, though, that some of the plastic waste is really not the doing of the actual fishermen, because even the plastics, the water bottles and the other containers are not things that they are economically empowered, for example, to actually buy and own. So they become the unfortunate recipients of the filth that is done by other people. And they actually think about this, which seems to be what they can do in the moment. They think about it. They discuss their displeasure of this particular thing through their music and hope that the right voices and authorities will hear and will be able to attend to that.
Thank you very much. And within your remit, do you see that part of your remit to educate the fisher folk in terms of the requirements coming out of this new plastic convention, this treaty? Thank you.
Yes. Actually, so part of the documentary is that we are going to do a screening in some of the communities, major communities that we took data from, and we are translating them into the local languages. And then in all the screenings, we go with experts, you know, and people who have the voices, government representatives, and so on. So we screen it, and then we have a Q&A session where they can ask questions that, you know, people can then respond directly to how they can overcome some of these challenges.
Thank you very much, Eric. There's David, there's Antia, Chelsea. Anybody wishes to intervene before we wrap up this very useful, timely webinar? Any more questions, comments?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sure.
Okay.
The other David, yes.
Okay, very finally, I just want to thank everyone who's participated today, everyone who's contributed to the volume. Certainly like to thank you, Mr. Charles, for your excellent work as chair of the whole proceedings. And although Rose had to go early, I'm sure she'd agree with me in saying that I think we've had a very successful webinar today, and I hope it could be the first of many going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, David, and thank you for being there, willing and able. In case Rose did not show up, I want to thank you for that. So on behalf of One Ocean Hub, I want to thank all of you. I want to thank the presenters. I want to thank the discussants, those who asked questions. I want to thank the audience for attending, and I want to thank the organizers for having faith in me to nominate me as chair of these proceedings. I've been advised that the presentations are recorded, and subject to any concern by the presenters, they should be made available. I now turn you over to Senia.
Thank you very much, everyone, for attending this webinar. Thank you, Eden.
Goodbye for now.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you. Take care.